I feel like we're catching categories, even though we've been sealing part of the ways we've been part of fucking dealing. I feel like every time you tried to take this shit, you wanted me to up round and then up or down? Nah, way. I say when we change and when we looking from a sewers of pipes, we try to give this air. I tried nothing but the days in sight, like I'm jumping from being to being. I hold backs and things. I couldn't even hold bags and things. You want to hold me back and then you grab everything. Then you look at me just to say you look at these things and grab everything you know about me. So then you want to say, I've been part of the rap and coding of raps. I've been part of the coding of slaps and coding of slaps and been coding of slaps. I couldn't even see even though I slicking part of its own scallops. I can't even get my shit out of my own rap. You send me to the boil, then I say nothing but a slurping. But I have to recoil. Everything comes from the way that I eat, hold back and see. I realize I need to hold back and look at the seat. Maybe look at the ceiling sometimes and realize that it's not in the same part of its own ways. I could not grab my own ways of what I define. I hold back and rinds, hold back and shine. I look in my pork of my rind, part of the shrines. Maybe it's just a chorizo. Maybe I'm looking for ways just to get a combine, Columbine, rolling vines. Been rolling in these fines, rolling in shines. I can't even say when I've been part of its own deprivation, even though you're trying to deviate my separation. Kevlon, I realize I cannot see the ways that I'm looking at my own song. Some days I want to say, when I have this old rap today, I look at classification of what you give me that rap song of that day. I add that, and then you give me a little piece of what you know that next day. Maybe it's essential, maybe it's vital, maybe I can't even find my own direction, even though it looking vital. I look at the beeps and the numbers, a screen of what you've been saying, part of its own ICU. What, you want to know part of that? Maybe it's just this beep and numbers. Maybe it's just a little bit of clean, even though the teachers, nurses, know what they want to do when they giving you numbers. They round your checks, they understand, even though you sitting in your own bed, sitting instead. Maybe it's just God and death, giving the same card game they've been knowing about since they've known about life and death. They call it the cradle of the wind. Maybe it's just a wind. Maybe the cradle was part of the wind and that made that cradle spin. But I've been looking at my own ways of its own solitary. I realize I've not been sitting any farther than its own penitentiary. I've been sitting in its own penitentiary. I sit back and I feel like it's part of its own scary. Knots and bones, I feel when its own knots I cannot feel when it looks for my own clones. Fathers and mothers be looking for trading in times, holding in fact I've been looking for its ways and times. I've never been normal. Maybe it's the fact I've been trying to fill with everything with my own ways and lines. Trying to find its own indictment to say I cannot fulfill everything I write just the same way that we do for our own signature to our own rights. When I'm looking for my own social security card, I look for the ways I can't even grab it so far. I'm looking for the ways that come towards. I'm looking for the ways that I'm looking for how it comes forward. Maybe I'm just a Tom. Maybe it's just an Uncle Tom. Maybe something that changes in that something of that song. Maybe it's the singular. Maybe I can't even get my shit to get its own ways from its own perpendicular. I've been trying to look for these lines to get across, looking for the ways I try to make it, looking for its own toss, getting over the fence just to get my own fucking struggle on. But then again, I don't even want to know how it goes from originally from my own mysterious ways of how I try to get it out my brain. Maybe it's not a rap, maybe it's not a sign, maybe it's not the way I've been saying the poem, maybe it's the way I've been doing it out of the order. I don't understand how you want to have its own way. I don't even understand the habits that you want me to go through its own terrain. I see when you say waving its own candy when I look at the train. I see this baby when I can take it out and smash the brain. That's a little insane, huh? But when you look at it in its own way, in its own facilities, maybe it not be physically in the way of man and how they do it. But I see the way we train, the way we go on our own pedals. Try to make its own tricycle. I see when we look at its own bicycle. I remember my own picture day. I've been looking half my face that day. It's a process. It's a way of movement. It's a way I march. It's probably the way we can't even get our death, part of its own ways of its own blackness. I say nothing but change of my own tactness, the deeds of its own transaction, a faction of its own circumstance of how I cannot say where I want to go to its own field, paying for its own yield of its own ways of circuit, changing its own impetuation of its own progress to its own circuit. Maybe it's a go-round, maybe it's the way that we drive and go round 4 pounds. I can't even change the ways even though I gain or lose 4 pounds. But for a foe, we looking for those ways of its own forbidden, restricted. They say when its own outline, they want to say what's coming out of its own ways of its own design. Funny, you lose a lot and you say it's part of its own lucrative Cruella couldn't even get this own shit when she was looking at her own Dalmatians. We looking for the straight 3 dogs. We try to get this shit to go so long. But projection never sees from its own straight up program. 4 bands. I can't even grab this and grab my 4 bands. Looking for an itinerary, looking for its own words of what it tells of its straight syllabus. Maybe I'm losing the miss. Cole back and Chris. Hold back and this. I can't even slip back and leaving. Jumping back. I might even slip my own disc. But we go through the CDs and ROMs. We change of our own arrangements and part of its own days of its own songs. They want me to add part of its poems. You want me to add part of its religion even though we changing everything part of its own song. Part of its own work. Imagine if we did this to the Bible. Imagine how much we can twist and work. It's another way of its own march of its straight of expedition. Hold back. You can't even grab its own rendition. The straight of its own export of how we obstruct and restrict our ways to our own defensive ways. Maybe it's a human of us. Maybe it's a human part about us. Maybe it's I can't even get a piece out of me. Maybe it's just me just talking a bunch of shit.